the Quran for A-level, so I did read the Quran then at that time. Didn't read it then for quite some years, but in recent years I've come back to reading it. I suppose my difficulty with it is that it claims to confirm that which has gone before, the Torah and the Injil. And yet, when I read it, it doesn't confirm, it seems to conflict and contradict with what has gone before. So I think that's one of my major difficulties when coming back to read it.
Oh, so you're saying your issue with Quran is the fact that it conflicts with the Bible, yeah?
Yeah. And yet it claims to confirm what has gone before.
Let me give you an example.
So for example, and this comes to the heart of perhaps the differences. Surah 4:157, the claim that Jesus wasn't crucified. I mean, I don't know how you personally interpret that verse.
Let me give you an example.
Contradicts what's the
yeah, I've understood. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, gentlemen. Sorry, I just want to Assalamu alaikum. How you doing? You all right? How you doing? You all right?
Yes, well, thank you.
Right?
Yes.
Me and my son Isa from Scotland. We watch you guys. It's amazing. No disrespect, I don't think I've seen much of yourself on YouTube, but yourself, brother. And I think it's an amazing thing that you guys are doing. At the same time, I don't think everyone comes set in their own mindset. I don't know if you can actually convince anyone otherwise.
Convincing is we leave that for God, doesn't
it? Yeah.
But then sometimes giving oxygen to the opposite, a lot of vitriol is spewed here against
not in this
no, not in the soft-spoken group. But that was only just an observation. But yeah, we're going to be heading back to Scotland. But seriously, genuinely, very, very impressed with what you're doing and your work. Keep it up, right? No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
So So let's just take the definition of vegan. Yeah.
Definition of
vegan. Yeah, somebody who doesn't have dairy or meat.
Yeah.
So let's just say that's the original definition. Over time, people start incorporating other things into it. They start maybe saying, look, you can eat meat, but you can eat meat on Tuesdays. Yeah. And then dairy, you can you have to make it. You have to really thin it out, and adding these extra rules. So if a person then makes this claim that, look, what I'm going to do, we're going to go back to the original. Yeah, and the original is that you don't eat dairy, you don't eat meat. So I guess the same applies over here as well. The monotheistic teachings of every religion, which is believing in one God, not believing in a trinity, not believing in human beings for salvation solely, and other things as well. So this is what the Quran means by confirming what was done by every single prophet that came from the time of Adam all the way to the time of the Prophet Muhammad.
But it seems to me a lot of the concepts that are there in the Torah are not. The Quran uses words without importing the meaning of those words very often. So I think it imports the word covenant, talks about the covenant that God made with Moses and his offspring. But if you look at the Hebrew Scriptures, right from the beginning, God's original intention was that He would be in fellowship, He would be in relationship with those that He had created. That was His original intention. But because of Adam's transgression, we were cut. There was that separation. So that God is constantly coming to His people in the Hebrew Scriptures, so that when we come to the New Testament, the incarnation to me is not a surprise. It's part of that whole redemptive narrative, and that whole redemptive narrative seems to be missing in the Quran. So I think, to me, Islam is there's a consistency within it. So if your starting point is that Adam made a mistake, he erred, and he was forgiven according to the Quran, his sin. Therefore, the solution to that is
Should
for
we just
God.
stand over here? I don't think they'll be able to see. No, I mean here, so they can see you as
The
well.
solution to that is then for God to give guidance through prophets. Obviously, Muhammad then being the seal of those prophets. So I can see a consistency within that, if that's your starting point. But if your starting point is that actually Adam's sin was more serious than just a mistake or erring, that actually he fell from that original state. There was that separation. Therefore, there's a more drastic remedy that's needed, which is salvation, which is provided in God's Messiah, Jesus Christ, who reconciles us back to God. Now you see right at the end of the Bible, that original intention comes to fruition because God makes his dwelling place with man. That was the whole point of the tabernacle, that God shows his Shekinah glory there in the temple, in the tabernacle. So he's always wanting to dwell with man, but sin separates us. So just to analogy, so if you had a headache and you went to a doctor, you might say, oh, you've just got a headache, I'll give you a paracetamol, and that would be fine, that would cure it. But what if you had not behind the headache was a brain tumor? You need serious surgery. So to me, that's the difference. We both have a different diagnosis, and the Bible has a more serious diagnosis, a deeper diagnosis, and therefore needs a deeper remedy.
Well, I think
Thank you for allowing me to say
problem,
that.
no problem.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying
So
to.
feel free to share.
Yeah, that's
more
what I was
or
saying
less.
to Joe. I mean, I'm not here to convince anybody, and I'm not here to force my view on you.
No.
I genuinely believe that the veracity of my arguments will stand for themselves,
Yeah, of
sort of
course.
thing. So
Yes, of course.
I'm glad we can do that. So the thing that I wanted to say, what you said presupposes the fact that the Old Testament that we have
Yeah.
has been preserved somewhat, but the Quran makes the claim that the previous books have been changed. So therefore, anything that we're told in the Quran,
Yeah.
that's what has been confirmed by God. Anything else has a question mark to it. So that's why I think our yardsticks are different.
Yeah.
Whilst here, our yardstick is the Quran,
Yes.
and the claim that you made, your yardstick, is the Old Testament.
Yeah, that was the starting point. Yeah, I think for me again, that raises a question because it seems to me, I mean, you can correct me. The Quran says that Allah preserves His words, and I think in the Arabic that's plural. I'm not. That's my understanding. I don't know if that's
No problem.
correct. So in which case, if he's preserved his words, then he surely has preserved the Torah and the Injil as well as the Quran. And therefore, if it's been corrupted, then how has he allowed it to be corrupted when he says his words cannot be changed?
Yeah. So let's just say that God has said words. Yeah. Let's just say.
Yeah.
Then what understanding are we taking from that? Yeah, we have to look at the rest of the Quran, and we have to look at the sayings of the Prophet. And the sayings of the Prophet and the rest of the Quran doesn't follow suit. Yeah, it doesn't say that the books have been preserved. The words, i.e. referring to revelation, because revelation didn't come all in one go. It came over a period of 23 years. So in other words, this falls in line with that whatever's being revealed has been preserved. And then the other point that you said, then why would God allow other books to be changed? Is why would God allow evil to happen? Why would God allow corruption to happen? It's the same answer, which is it's a test.
Except if he said he would preserve his.
Yeah, but he didn't. That's the claim I'm saying.
So
I'm saying he's referring to Revelation. Only the Quran.
Only the Quran.
Only the Quran.
Right. Yeah.
So,
But then you also said that the claim is that the Torah and the Injil have been changed. But again, when I read the Quran, it doesn't make that claim.
Yeah, the claim is clear. The previous books have been changed and corrupted. It's one of the claims the Quran makes.
But when I read it, what those verses that seem to suggest doesn't refer to the actual text itself. It refers to those that maybe have made up or invented scriptures for their own profit. Those that are. So it doesn't seem to refer to the changing of the actual text, but people that have given their own meanings or interpretations to us, or invented their own scriptures for profit, whatever it means. It doesn't seem to refer to the actual changing of the text. And if you think about it logically, supposing there were some
see if I can bring it up.
heretical Jewish or Christian groups around Arabia at that time, they may have changed one or two manuscripts.
Yeah.
But what about all the manuscripts in Jerusalem, in other places? Sure, they haven't changed the whole of it. So you've still got those preserved Hebrew manuscripts with which to compare these corrupted ones that the Quran changes. Do you see? It doesn't hold up. It doesn't make sense, and I don't think it's what the Quran is saying either.
Let me see if I can bring it up.
Are you meaning the actual changing of the actual text itself?
Yeah, the text itself.
But does the Quran say that? I suppose that's my question.
Okay. So Surah 3 verse 78 says, "And there is indeed a group among them who twist their tongues with the book."
Just the tongues.
Yeah. With the book, that you may suppose it is to be from the book, but it is not from the book. And they say it is from God, though it is not from God, and they knowingly speak a lie against God. And then verse 46 says, among
but
those...
that one clearly says with their tongues, which is what I said. It's people that are misinterpreting what has gone before. That doesn't, to me, doesn't talk about the changing of the actual text itself.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Is there another one?
Okay. Among those who are Jews are those who distort the meanings of the word and say, we hear and we obey. Hear as one who hears not, and attend to us, twisting their tongues and disparaging religion.
Exactly.
And had they said, we hear and obey, and listen and regard us, it would have been better for them and more proper. But God cursed them for their disbelief, so they believe not, save a few. And then a hadith goes, O community of Muslims, how is it that you seek wisdom from the people of the book? Your book, brought down upon his prophet, blessed and peace of God upon him, is the latest report about God. You read a book that has not been distorted, but the people of the book, as God related to you, exchanged that which God wrote, changing the book with their hands. That's pretty...
But the actual Quranic text talks about tongues, doesn't it?
Yeah, but...
And changing meanings. That's not changing the text. And the second one was a hadith.
Yeah.
So how reliable is that hadith?
The hadith is Sahih Muslim. It's authentic. It's in fact, it's in the second most authentic.
But it's
the third most authentic in the Islamic tradition.
But any hadith doesn't have the same authority as the Quran itself.
If the hadith is mutawatir, it can be very close. But again, as Muslims, we don't say, oh, the Quran has said this, the hadith has said. We take the Quran and the hadith together.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, they complement each other.
Yeah.
They're not kind of conflicting each other here. And the Quran isn't going to give immense amount of details. Yeah, that's the job of the Prophet. He's a walking, talking embodiment of the Quran. So we have the verse of the Quran, and the Prophet has given exegesis of this. So this is very clear. Yeah, that the Islamic stance is that the books have been changed. Now, when we, let's just say, pick up a book, we were to pick up maybe the King James Version, New International Version, and let's just say you go in Book of John, chapter 7, verse 53. It will tell you right at the footnote. I don't think anybody disputes this. It says this has been added in by the scribes. The last 10 verses.
What it says.
So if I just add one more on, then you can answer both.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the last 10 verses of the book of Mark, ironically your name is Mark as well. Last 10 verses, that's been added on by the scribes as well. So, and at the bottom, somehow this seems acceptable. And this in fact confirms what the Quran is saying, that these people have added it on with their hands. And we know that Christianity is a bookish faith which relies on, early on it relied on scribes that, let's face it, were not professionals. And even when you look at Greek doesn't have punctuation in it. It's written, it doesn't have spaces. So again, it's left open to interpretation. On top of that, Jesus spoke Aramaic. So you've got Aramaic, then you've got Greek, and then you've got these people who want to, copy it down, but scribal errors then creep in, parablepsis, homoutiliton, all these different forms of copying errors. And then today we've also got King James Version. Right at the beginning says this has major and minor errors in it. Then we look at John 7:53, it's got it at the bottom. So if we look at all of these things, it seems like it's pretty much confirming what the Quran's saying.
Yeah, just
And the Hadith.
yeah, a few points on there. Certainly on John 7, what it says is that this account is not found in the original documents.
Yeah, the manuscripts.
Yeah, in the original, in the earliest ones. Doesn't mean the story wasn't authentic. That's one point. And also the ending of Mark, we can say the same thing. But the Bible, here's the thing: the Bible is an honest book. If there are textual variants, it tells us where those variants are. So we would say that it's inspired by God as originally given. We don't ascribe the same inspiration to that which has been copied. We recognize that there are textual variants, but we've got so many existing manuscripts that we can be certain what the original was. That's the important thing. The Bible is the written word of God. Jesus is the living word of God. But the thing is, you have the same issues with the Quran. That's the thing. We ought to be having the similar conversations, because coming back to my point, as I've looked into it, it seems that right from the beginning there was contention about what constituted the Quran. So there was dispute amongst Muhammad's first followers, and so there were four of the best reciters of the Quran. Ubay ibn Ka'b said that he was convinced that there were chapters of the Quran that were missing. Ibn Masud said that there were only 111 chapters of the Quran, because the first chapter and the last two surahs were prayers to God, not direct speech of Allah. And he was very clear that he wanted to hold on to his Quran, so that there were disputes even amongst the followers of Muhammad who was constituted. Some of it was memorized, and those that memorized it were losing their lives in the battle. And there was one verse that was only remembered by one person, and yet you're supposed to have two witnesses. I forgot his name now. One of the caliphs, Uthman, was worried that there were differences emerging in the Quran. So he said, we can't have this. We'll be like the Jews and the Christians. Let's just have one Quran. And so all the variants were then burnt. So the best you could say is that Uthman's Quran has been preserved, but then you would need a Quran from the time, a manuscript, complete manuscript from the time of Uthman, with which to compare your modern manuscripts, which to me you haven't got. So this idea that the Quran is perfectly preserved just doesn't add up in reality, because you've got the Hafs, which 90% of Muslims read, and then the Wash. And there are differences not only in pronunciation, but actually in the Arabic text between the Hafs and the Wash. So which is the one that's preserved in heaven? That will be my issue. So all I'm saying, if you said the Quran has been very well preserved, fine, no problem. But we recognize that, yes, over the years, there's been different versions and textual variations. No problem, we're on the same page. But because you make this claim of perfect preservation, it just doesn't stack up as people are looking into it.
Okay, very good. There's a few things that you mentioned. I was just keeping a track of all of them. There was like 5-6 of them.
Yes,
I'm going to see if I can deal with them one at a time.
Yeah, so I think I started with
John. John chapter 5.
We started with the Bible.
So you said John chapter 7 verse 53. You said just because the earliest manuscripts that we have don't have it, it doesn't mean that the earlier ones didn't have it.
No, I said it doesn't mean it's not an authentic story.
Right, but there's no way of us being able to verify this, because there's no manuscript that will confirm this thing. Surely we rely on the earliest manuscript that we have, especially
it's in the majority texts.
So especially if it's a bookish religion, it needs to have a book-related preservation. Now the issue that you're conflating here is Islam doesn't claim to be a bookish religion. We believe, and we're able to prove, that our primary way of preservation is orally. That it was revealed and it was memorized, and that's how it was passed on. again, I'm just juggling a lot of things.
No, sure, of course,
So with so if it's a bookish religion, then it does need to have a manuscript that then confirms its presence. Otherwise, it seems that the evidence points to the fact that those verses weren't there, especially if something's a bookish religion and relies upon books. And the other thing that you said was the same with Mark. But then this would also apply to the Quran, and it would also apply to Ibn Mas'ud, the reply that you gave. That, but I mean, I can't remember. There's just so many. Okay, then coming back to Abdullah bin Mas'ud, and Ubay bin Ka'b. Ubay bin Ka'b and Abdullah bin Mas'ud. Again, there being disputes about chapters. Again, chapters at that moment in time doesn't mean that chapters are missing. It means that does this go in this chapter or does this go in that chapter? Are you combining two chapters or are you separating chapters? Because at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the Prophet memorized it and passed it on. And at the time of the Prophet, the whole Quran not only was memorized by the Prophet, it was memorized by the companions. And even at the time of the Prophet, it was written down. All of it was written down. And then at the time of Abu Bakr, the first caliph, it was then left, all of them were put together and they were left with the lady Hafsa, radiallahu anha. And then Uthman radiallahu an came, and thereafter the issue at the time of Uthman was similar to what the Bible went through, which is that there were scribal errors that were creeping in. But the Muslims didn't rely upon the books. They relied on people that had memorized it. In fact, Islam has a way of continuously orally preserving it. For example, Taraweeh, the time of the second caliph, the whole Quran gets recited in Taraweeh, the Ramadan prayers. Every Friday, Quran is recited. Every prayer, Quran is recited. Children as young as 6, some claim even young as 3 and 4 even have memorized the Quran. So Quran is an oral memorization, and the books were in support of that oral memorization. And because other scribal errors had crept in, then you had a book that didn't have those scribal errors, and the ones that did, they were of course removed and destroyed, just so it was easy. And then of course you had one continuous one. When it comes to the different qira'ats, the qira'ats do not change the meanings. They are different pronunciations and different ways of reciting it. However, for you to say that there is a completely different meaning, totally different meaning, I would be interested to see what you bring forth, because I haven't come across a single one. But if that was the case, Mark, and there were so many different recitations of it, then surely as Muslims today we'd have different Qurans.
But you have.
Which one?
You can. Well, I'd say there are differences between the Hafs and the Wash, for example, and there are also different. I know that you can buy different Qurans from around the world. Look at the Arabic, and you'll find differences in the Arabic, which changes the meaning. It may not be a huge change, but the question is, which is the one that's on the eternal preserved tablets in heaven? If there are those differences, how would you know? And how would you see the whole thing about memorization? I get that, and it's impressive the way the Muslims can recite the Quran. But supposing, I suppose this comes back to the dispute original. You could have a chain, so A to Z of people. A passes on to B, B to C, all the way through. Now, B could pass on accurately to C all the way through, and that could be perfectly preserved from B to Z. But supposing B misinterpreted what A had said, do you see what I mean? Then what you're memorizing What I'm saying is, you may be perfectly memorizing it, but what you're memorizing, how would you know that was what was originally given, unless you've got. I know you say it's not a bookish tradition, but you still got to have something. It was still written down at some point. You still got to have some manuscript with which to compare. And when you look at the existing manuscripts, the Topkapi, the Samarkand, when scholars have looked at it, it's only recent years they've had access to it, so this is still fairly new, which is why we're discovering these things. There are differences, there are overwritings and all of these things. So this idea of perfect preservation just doesn't stack up. And that if Allah's claiming perfect preservation of the Quran, then he's either incompetent because he hasn't preserved it, or he's a liar, and that's an issue.
So I think it's your misunderstanding of the claims, and I think there's a bit of inaccuracy there as well. For example, I've quoted certain verses, I've quoted the different versions of the Bible. You're claiming that you can bring certain copies of the Quran and they will be different. I'd like to know which ones, so then I can tell you. But because you're not providing any names, it's just a claim which has no backing. It's like a car without an engine. There's not really much I can do with it.
Right, so there are a number of different types of differences between the Hafs and the Wash. So type A is changing the meaning of nouns, and there are 11 instances of that. So unfortunately I haven't got the Arabic, but I mean this is a familiar one. Hafs, Malik, owner, and Wash, Malik, king. So okay, that's more pronunciation differences, not a great deal of difference between owner and king.
No, but that's the thing, you've got Malik, you've got Malik. That's pronunciation, but the thing is, now someone's pinned down an English translation of that. So we're now focusing more on owner and king, isn't it? But the Quran, it's not reliant and it's not dependent upon English. The Quran should be measured with the criteria of his Arabic, not of his English translation. You see? So Malik and Malik, I can say, okay, no problem. What's the issue there? But the issue that you're bringing
I can see that on that one. But there are some. So sort of 494 Hafs is translated the peace. Wash is the greeting.
The greeting is peace, isn't it? Assalamu alaikum means peace be upon you.
Two kinds of magic, or two magicians. Type B, changing nouns from singular to plural, there's 13 instances. So Hafs has a poor person, singular. Wash, poor people. Hafs has his message, his messages in the Wash. Word in Hafs, words. Type C, changing meaning from a noun to a preposition or a verb. So Hafs says he made, and Wash, maker. Hafs has slaves. Don't quite know about that one. There was one that's, I mean, for example, this one, it seems quite a significant difference. So Surah 3146, Hafs says he fought. Wash as he was killed. It's in reference to the prophets. So either the prophets are doing the fighting or the prophets are being killed. And that seems to me that there is a difference there.
Who's the translator?
Sorry?
Who's the translator?
I'm not sure which English version they're referring to, but...
Because that's very important.
But, I mean, if I can't read Arabic, so I suppose what I needed to is write down the actual Arabic next to it, so that you could see that there's actually a difference in the lettering.
But then also the translation. We need to look at the translation as well for the viewers that don't understand. It's very easy, for example, you take a word like iqra, say, oh, the Quran says read, but the correct translation is recite. So it depends upon the person translating it also. But the claim still still stands that even with these ones, whichever translation that you got it from, they're still incredibly similar. And one would need to look at the Arabic, one would need to look at the translator in order to make an honest conclusion. The only one, which was the last one, if I can just take a picture of that, that would be interesting for me to just look. just to find out who translated it and.
Yeah, do.
So if I can I just take the picture of the whole thing?
Yeah,
Would that be easier?
Yeah, whatever's easiest for you.
Was
Yeah,
this
and
the
this
more
is
side
from-
or was the other side as well?
That was.
Oh, I'll do that one.
And this is just the differences between Hafs and Wash. One of the sources for that is a scholar by the name of Dan Brubaker. He's got a YouTube video called Textual Quran Variants.
Yeah, Brubaker's been heavily refuted. In fact,
Well, I've heard that, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
You've got Mansour there.
Yeah.
He can actually speak
Yeah,
to you
he's an
about the.
expert.
Yeah, because he's looked into manuscripts.
Yeah.
But there is somebody.
I mean, I'm not
Paul Williams.
an expert.
Yeah. He spoke to
I'm
somebody.
just sharing what I'm uncovering.
He made a lot of blunders, and there was an academic journal against him as well. Mansour did a video, and I would suggest that you watch the video of Paul Williams, and because he's a manuscript critic as well. Paul Williams.
Yeah, I know Paul. Yeah.
Have you spoken to him?
Yeah, I've spoken to Paul before, not for a while, but yeah.
Okay, so just go on his channel.
Okay.
And you just type in Quran manuscripts Paul Williams.
Yeah.
And he brings them on,
Right,
which will be worth a watch.
Yeah.
But sorry, what did you say after that? I can't remember.
Yeah, but it's even so because.
No, thank you.
I'm okay, thank you. It seems to me that if you look at Zembrupa's YouTubes, the physical evidence is there that you can see the differences in the Arabic just by looking at it. I don't know colleagues that have actually sat down and with someone that's an Arabic speaker and gone through it and say, well, that's not the same as that. So however you translate it, the point is there are differences in the Arabic text.
Yeah.
And that's a
fair point. I acknowledge that. But then a very kind of basic response from my side would be, but we've acknowledged that early manuscripts were copied, and we need to carbon date and find out. Well, they most likely they have been carbon dated, but none claim to be the one. Preserved. Okay, you're right. None claim to be the one that is used as a reference or the one that was kept with Aisha or Hafsa, and that was the issue, because the thing now is, just like with the Bible, you have the Protestant Bible will have 66 books, the Roman Catholic 72 books, Ethiopian Orthodox about 82, etc. We would see very similar things happening with the Quran, where there'd be such enormous discrepancies. And you say, if you compare the manuscripts, there's one really good book that's written by Torath Publishing. It's called, it's a really big one. If you go on their website and just type in Quran, they've taken one chapter and they've got like seven different manuscripts above and below each other. So you can see for yourself the hard work's been done for you. The Sana'a script, the Hijazi script, all these scripts are there, and you can compare it for yourself. As a layman, you can go there and you can see, is it changed? Is it not changed? Now that was one surah. He did want to do more, and eventually the Quran, but unfortunately he passed away and he was unable to. So that's there. So that Daniel Brubaker, So that's Daniel Brubaker's thing. Again, that's been refuted. There's a lot of inconsistencies even in his methodology as well, which his name begins with H. He's on the Paul Williams one, check him out. So that's his one. And with regards to
check that out.
And with the recitation, the thing is, Mark, if there were discrepancies, those discrepancies, like the Bible, should have been magnified. And today, if a person's reading in any mosque, Quran is being recited, anyone can correct the Imam. In fact, I was speaking to a Christian 2 weeks ago. He claimed to be an ex-Muslim, and he knew one of the chapters of the Quran. It's the third one from the back. Surah Ikhlas. it's only like 3-4 lines.
Yeah.
And I missed one bit out deliberately. And I read it to him, and I said, "What's missing?" And he told me this is missing, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you as an ex-Muslim or Christian